Hello there, and welcome back to another project video. In this video, we're going to be building an adjustable stool. Before we get started, let's talk about some of the parts and some of the tools we'll need to build that stool. First of all, from the standpoint of the stool parts, we're going to need a seat. The seat is 16 inches in X direction, 14.5 in Y, and 1.25 inches thick. I've already milled this down, or thickness planed this down to 1.25 inches. We're going to need 3 legs. The legs are 21 inches long, 4.5 inches in the Y direction, and 1.25 inches thick. And again, these have already been milled down to 1.25 inches thick. We will need a shaft for the seat. This will be our threaded shaft. This is 3 1/8 by 3 1/8 by 17.5 inches long. And then we're going to need what we call a nut plate. This is for the dual nut plate, meaning we can get 2 of the nuts out of it. It's 14.5 inches long. It is 6 inches in the Y direction and 1.75 inches thick. Now, there's also, if you've seen some of the plans, there's also a single nut plate, which is approximately half of this. It'll be 7.5 inches in this direction, 6 inches in this direction, and 1.75 inches thick. That's the parts that we'll need for the stool itself. Now, there's also some fixtures that we'll go over as we use them that will help us as we're machining the parts. So I'm not going to cover those right now. We'll get to those when we actually use them. But there's also some drill bits and router bits that we're going to need. Let's go over those. First of all, number 1, you're going to need a 1/4 inch drill bit. Number 2, you're going to need some kind of a 1/4 inch straight cutter. You can use a dual flute. I happen to be using a spiral down cutter. You're going to need a 90-degree, 1-inch diameter V cutter, V groove cutter. You need our old friend, the 1.25 inch surface planing. And by the way, I might mention the magnate numbers here. This is a 2704. If you're using magnate, the 90-degree V groove is a 706, and you can have whatever kind of drill bit and spiral cutter that you want to pick up. The next one is going to be an 1.5 inch diameter core box. That's a magnate 810. The next one is a 1/2 inch radius and a 1/4 inch flat on the tip of it, router bit for roundover. It's magnate 1278. Next one is just a 2 flute 1/2 inch straight cutter, and it is a magnate 285B. This is going to be number 8, and it is a 1/4 inch radius with a 1/4 inch flat on the bottom of it, roundover bit. Its magnate number is 1274. This little guy right here is a 90-degree side cutting groove bit. Put it here, and we'll use this for making the threads. It's a magnate 751. And then this guy is a 14-degree dovetail bit, 3/4 inch cutter, and it is magnate 404. So that kind of concludes the set of tools that we're going to need. We're going to start by building the seat first. And then we'll probably move to the legs. Next, we'll do the the 2 threaded nuts next, and then finish it up with the threaded shaft that is used to raise and lower the seat. So, okay, let's get started making some sawdust. Okay, let's get started building the seat. Before we get into actually using the seat itself, or actually machining the seat itself, I want to cover a little bit about this setup table that's available. This is kind of a cool idea. There are several parts to this adjustable stool that are machined in the XYZ axis. This setup plate has been built with the idea that you can put all of those parts on here and you don't have to readjust your machine. There's clamps over here and there's a little peg right here, such that when I put this on and I hit it against that peg, this guy comes down, and this point right here is my X0, Y0 point. And so as soon as I get the machine set up, I can now cut the seat, I can cut the legs, and I can cut the adjustable, the nut plate also, without having to readjust my machine, just using these pieces right here. So, this guy's machine, he's got little notches here that show where X0, Y0 is, where the other end of the leg should show up, where the other end of the nut plate should show up, and up here is where the seat should show up, of course. Now, a little bit of other information on the way I put this together. This is a seat. I actually twisted the grain of the material, so the grain on this side is going this way, and the grain on this side is going this way. When I glued these two pieces together, it gives us a little bit more strength in the seat when you do that. All right, we're going to put that down, we're going to push it up. We will take our little wrench, tighten this stuff down, and we've got this guy in place. He's nice and tight down there. He's on the board. And one thing that I didn't mention, and it's going to be, you probably can't see this in the video, so I'll set it right up here and show you. Each one of the places where you put these low pro clamps has got this little insert that goes into the board, and then the threads in this match the threads on the low pro clamp. And so you just pick it up, change the position, and all of your clamp positions are in the correct spot to match the dimensions of the boards that we covered at the first of the video. So, we're now set up. Let's get a bit in the spindle, and we will be off and running. Okay, a few comments about the setup for this. First of all, this is a two-sided cut, two-sided part. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come around and bore some holes, some alignment holes in the top of this part. And the second thing is we're going to start carving out the seat. And then the third thing is we're going to put a round over on the edge of the seat. Now, something I didn't mention about the setup board. I talked about the setup board having places for the clamps to be able to clamp these parts. But something I didn't mention was that I can take the alignment holes, turn this over, and there's already holes in this setup board that will accept the pegs that are in the top of the part. And we'll see that on multiple of these parts are two-sided parts. We'll see that again. I have zeroed out X and Y right here. The way this part is set up is the bed surface is Z0. Now in this case, that doesn't mean the bed of my machine. What it means is the surface of the setup plate that we've got here. So I have Z0, set Z0 to the surface of this, X and Y right here. I've got a drill bit in here. That'll be the first thing. Then we'll convert to the 1.5" cove, and then we'll convert to a round over bit and cut the first side of the seat out. Let's get started. Alright, now we've finished cutting the top. We're going to turn it over and cut the bottom. To do that, we're going to loosen the clamps on both sides. We're going to pick this up. First of all, we're going to put some dowel in the alignment holes that were drilled. So we can pick this up, turn it over, and one thing I like to do is I usually turn this over and I always turn it the wrong way. So I put an X where X0, Y0 is, and if I ever get lost, then I come back and say, okay, this is the way I started. So I've got the X here. You're going to pick it up and turn it this way. Move it back. It's going to go right in those holes just like you want it. You'll tap it down. There it is. We'll put some pressure back on the sides here. And we got it lined up, and it's solid, and we're down there. Now, on this side, we're going to do 3 operations. First of all, we're going to use our 1.5" diameter core box bit. We're going to cut a cove on the bottom of the seat. Next, we're going to use a 1/2" diameter cutter to put a hole in here. This mortise will accept the tenon that's on the end of the adjustable shaft, a thread shaft. And then we're going to cut the whole thing out. So that's the 3 steps that we've got here. Let's get it started. Okay, so that completes the seat. We're cleaned it up a little bit, pick it right up. Got a little bit of sanding to do, but not too bad. Now, let's move on to cutting one of the legs. Okay, to set up for the legs, we're going to use the same setup board. Put the board against the post right here. You'll see that we've got right here and right here, we've got a connection for our clamps. We will take this clamp off, put it down right here. Take this guy off. We'll put him right here. And then tighten down the clamps. Okay, how easy is that? Our X0, Y0 is set. And this piece is clamped in. We'll get some software loaded and get started cutting. Okay, a pretty quick set of operations on side one for the leg. What did it do? It drilled the 4 alignment holes and then put a round over radius on this side. We're going to now turn it over and we will put the same radius on the other side and then cut the part out. We're going to pick it up, turn it over, use our holes that were drilled here, get the clamps back out of the way. Perfect fit. Now, just kind of a word of advice here. That router bit gets real close to this clamp. So I twist it just a little bit to kind of make sure the router bit doesn't hit it. Doesn't do the clamp or the router bit any good when they hit the clamp. Nice and tight. We'll get some bits changed, get some code loaded, and we'll be good to go for side 2. This finishes cutting out the first leg. Of course, if you're building the stool, you're going to want to cut out 2 more legs. But our next step is going to be to put the dovetail joints on the leg. To do that, we're going to move to the vertical vise. We'll clamp the leg in the vertical vise and go through 3 steps to build the dovetail. The first step is going to use the dovetail bit as kind of a surface planing bit. Second step, we'll do a roughing pass of the dovetail, and the third step will be a final pass for the dovetail joint. Now that we've got the leg complete, we'll move on to building the nut plate. Cutting out the nut is going to follow a lot of the same steps that you've already seen. First step is to drill some alignment holes. Second step is going to be to put a round over on both of the nuts. This will complete side 1. We'll put some pegs in the holes, turn it over, and do side 2. Side 2 is going to start by doing a round over. Then it's going to go to a 1/2-inch cutter and cut the hole in the center for the adjustable shaft to go through, the threaded shaft to go through. Then it will cut the part out, leaving some tabs in there. The tabs are needed because the final step is to put some threads inside the nut, and the tabs will hold the piece in place while the threads are being cut. That completes side 1, side 2, and threading of both of the nuts. Now, the step that remains is putting the dovetail cut in each one of the nuts. We'll illustrate putting a dovetail cut in 2 of the 3 dovetail joints on each one of the nuts. And that completes the video for illustrating how the different parts of the nut are built. Next, we'll move on to creating the threaded shaft. Cutting the threaded shaft is a 3-step process. The first step is going to be to turn the part round. The second step is going to be to put a tenon on one end of the thread shaft. And then the third step is going to be to actually cut the threads. Now we have all the parts built, so we can put together our adjustable stool. Here's the results of these parts put together.